Delilah O'Connor clutched the eviction notice to her chest as the townsfolk of Silver Creek snickered and whispered behind their hands, their judgment stinging worse than the hot Arizona sun of 1878. Her husband Thomas had vanished 3 days prior, taking what little savings they had and leaving nothing but debts, rumors, and a shop that hadn't turned a profit in months. "Looks like Thomas finally wised up and left," said Mrs. Henderson loud enough for Delilah to hear as she passed the general store. Always knew that O'Connor woman was too uppity for her own good. Delilah kept her chin high despite the burning in her eyes. At 26, she was now alone in a town that seemed to take pleasure in her misfortune. The dress shop she'd poured her heart into for 3 years was about to be seized for unpaid rent. The home she'd made with Thomas, the home she'd believed would someday echo with children's laughter, would be taken next. "You've got till the end of the week, Mrs. O'Connor," Mr. Talbot, the landlord, had told her with thinly veiled satisfaction. "Unless you can come up with 3 months' back rent." The sum might as well have been $1 million. Without Thomas's income from the livery stable, meager as it had been, she couldn't possibly manage it. Delilah pushed open the door to her shop, the little bell above it jingling cheerfully in stark contrast to her mood. She moved mechanically around the space, running her fingers over the bolts of fabric she'd ordered from back east, the fine laces she'd convinced Thomas they should splurge on, the half-finished wedding dress for Mary Wilson that would never be completed now. "I won't cry," she whispered to herself, though a tear betrayed her and slid down her cheek. "I won't give them the satisfaction." The sound of spurs jingling outside her shop made Delilah hastily wipe her face. The last thing she needed was another townsfolk coming to gawk at her misfortune. The door opened, admitting both the blazing afternoon sun and a tall figure she didn't immediately recognize. He removed his hat as he stepped inside, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, marking him as neither a local nor a drifter, but something in between. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice deep and touched with a hint of Texas. "I'm looking to have some mending done if you're not too busy." Delilah straightened her shoulders, professionalism momentarily overriding her personal troubles. "Of course. What can I help you with, Mr. Kane?" "Kieran Kane." He extended a hand that was calloused and strong. "Just rode in from Tucson Way." Delilah hesitated before accepting his handshake. "Delilah O'Connor. What sort of mending do you need, Mr. Kane?" He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a shirt with a long tear down the sleeve. "Got caught on a mesquite branch. Also got a jacket that's seen better days and could use some new buttons on these pants." It wasn't much work, but it was something, perhaps enough to buy her a few more days before everything came crashing down. "I can have these ready by tomorrow afternoon, Mr. Kane." He nodded, those keen eyes observing her in a way that made Delilah feel he could see right through her carefully maintained composure. "That'll do just fine. I'll be staying at the boarding house for a spell. Got some business in town." After he left, Delilah found herself staring at the door. There had been something different about the way he'd looked at her. No pity, no judgment. Just a straightforward assessment that felt oddly respectful. It was more courtesy than she'd received from anyone in Silver Creek since Thomas had left. She set to work on his mending, grateful for the distraction. By the time evening shadows stretched across the wooden sidewalks, she had finished most of it. The work had kept her hands busy, but her mind still raced with worry. Even with this small job, she'd be at least $70 short of what she needed to keep the shop. The next morning brought more whispers as she walked to her shop. Delilah heard fragments. Husband ran off with a saloon girl. Always had ideas above her station. Serves her right for thinking she could run a business. She was arranging her display window when she spotted Kieran Kane across the street, deep in conversation with Sheriff Mills. Something in their manner, the serious expressions, the low voices made her curious, but she pushed the thought aside. She had her own problems to worry about. Kieran came for his mending that afternoon, paying her twice what she'd asked. "This is too much, Mr. Kane," she protested, trying to hand back the extra coins. "The work's worth it," he said simply, refusing to take the money. "Those stitches are finer than any I've seen west of the Mississippi." Before she could argue further, the door burst open and Mr. Talbot stormed in, his face red with anger. "Mrs. O'Connor, I've just heard you've been telling folks I'm being unreasonable about your rent," he bellowed, not noticing Kieran standing by the counter. "I've said no such thing, Mr. Talbot," Delilah replied, feeling her face grow hot with humiliation that this confrontation was happening in front of a customer. "Well, someone's been asking questions all over town, and I don't appreciate having my business affairs discussed in the saloon." He moved closer, finger pointing at her accusingly. "Just because your good-for-nothing husband skipped town doesn't mean you get special treatment. I want my money by Friday or you're out. That's enough." Kieran's voice was quiet but carried such authority that Talbot stopped mid-tirade and turned. "This isn't your concern, stranger," Talbot said, though with considerably less bluster. "I'm making it my concern." Kieran stepped between them, his posture relaxed, but somehow conveying a clear warning. "No need to speak to the lady that way. I'm sure a business arrangement can be reached without all this shouting." Talbot seemed to deflate slightly under Kieran's steady gaze. "This is between me and Mrs. O'Connor, and Mrs. O'Connor deserves the same respect you'd show any other business owner in town." Kieran's tone remained even, but there was steel beneath it. "Now, perhaps you'd like to discuss this matter when you're feeling more composed." For a moment, Delilah thought Talbot might argue, but instead he gave her one last glare. "Friday, Mrs. O'Connor, not a day later." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. Delilah found herself gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady herself. "Thank you, Mr. Kane, but that wasn't necessary," she finally said. "I'm perfectly capable of handling Mr. Talbot." "No doubt," Kieran replied, settling his hat back on his head. "But sometimes it doesn't hurt to have someone else step in, especially when the other party isn't fighting fair." "Fair or not, he's right about one thing. If I don't have the rent by Friday, I'll lose everything." She hadn't meant to say it aloud, and certainly not to a virtual stranger. Kieran studied her for a long moment. "Your husband left recently?" The question was direct but somehow not intrusive. Delilah nodded. 3 days ago, without warning." "And the town's enjoying your misfortune a little too much," she gave a bitter laugh. "Thomas was well liked. I'm the outsider who came from back east with fancy ideas about opening a dress shop in a mining town. They think I drove him away with my ambitions." Kieran's eyes narrowed slightly. "Folks are quick to judge what they don't understand. It doesn't matter what they think. What matters is I have 2 days to come up with money I don't have, or I lose both my shop and my home." Something flickered in Kieran's expression, a decision being made. "Mrs. O'Connor, I might have a proposition for you if you're interested in hearing it." Delilah regarded him warily. "What kind of proposition?" "A business arrangement. I need someone with your skills and you need capital. I think we might be able to help each other." He gestured to the chair near her workbench. "May I?" Curiosity overcame caution, and she nodded. As he sat and began to explain his idea, Delilah found herself listening with increasing interest, and for the first time in days, a flicker of hope. Kieran Kane wasn't what he first appeared to be. He wasn't just a cowboy passing through. He was a businessman who supplied costumes and clothing to traveling theater companies across the Western Territories. His usual seamstress in Tucson had taken ill, leaving him with orders he couldn't fill, including an urgent commission for a theater troupe due to perform in Santa Fe in 3 weeks. "I need quality work done quickly," he explained. "What I saw in my mending tells me you're more than capable. I'd be willing to pay a premium for rush work with half up front." The sum he named was enough to cover her rent and then some. "Why would you trust me with this? You don't know me," Delilah said, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "I know good work when I see it. And I make it my business to judge character." His eyes held hers steadily. "You strike me as someone who honors their commitments." The irony wasn't lost on her. "Unlike my husband, that's his failing, not yours." The simplicity of his statement, his clear separation of her from Thomas's actions, struck a chord within her that resonated with painful clarity. No one else in town had bothered to make that distinction. "I'll need to see designs, measurements," she said, already mentally calculating what fabrics she had in stock that might be suitable. A smile touched his lips for the first time. "I've got all that in my room at the boarding house. I can bring everything over first thing tomorrow." As he prepared to leave, Kieran paused at the door. "One more thing, Mrs. O'Connor. This arrangement stays between us for now. I've found business goes smoother without too many curious onlookers." After he left, Delilah sat for a long time, turning over the unexpected opportunity in her mind. It seemed too convenient, too fortuitous to be true. Yet the alternative was certain ruin, and there had been something in Kieran Kane's direct gaze that inspired trust, despite her recent experience with betrayal. The next morning, true to his word, Kieran arrived with detailed sketches, fabric samples, and precise measurements for costumes ranging from Shakespearean nobles to Western heroes. The work was challenging, but exactly the kind of creative project Delilah had dreamed of when opening her shop. As promised, he paid half up front, enough for Delilah to visit Mr. Talbot and settle her rent with cool dignity, ignoring the surprise on his face when she counted out the coins. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Kieran would visit the shop in the mornings to check progress and discuss details. Their conversations, initially focused on the work, gradually expanded to include their backgrounds and experiences. Delilah learned that Kieran had grown up in Boston but had come west after the war, making his fortune not in gold or cattle but in the burgeoning business of entertainment for frontier towns hungry for culture. He, in turn, discovered that she had trained with a French dressmaker in Philadelphia before following Thomas west when he'd inherited a claim to his uncle's livery stable. "He promised me a new start," she told Kieran as she pinned a costume for a Shakespearean queen. "A place where we could build something together. And instead he left you holding the pieces," Kieran observed, handing her a spool of gold thread. "Yes." She jabbed a pin with perhaps more force than necessary. "The worst part is that I suspected something was wrong for months." The livery was struggling, but Thomas kept insisting everything was fine. He'd stay out late, come home smelling of whiskey and cheap perfume. I confronted him once, and he accused me of not supporting him, of being too focused on my shop. Was he right? Kieran asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. Delilah paused, considering the question seriously. "Perhaps partly. I did love my work, but I also tried to help him with the livery books, suggested ways to attract more business. He refused to listen." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter now. He made his choice." "And what will you choose, Mrs. O'Connor, once these costumes are finished?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on immediate survival that she hadn't thought beyond the current crisis. "I don't know," she admitted. Stay and rebuild, I suppose, if I can. This shop was my dream. Kieran nodded, his expression thoughtful. Dreams are worth fighting for. As they worked together day after day, Delilah found herself looking forward to his visits. There was something comforting about his presence, solid and dependable in a way Thomas had never been. She caught herself watching his hands as he helped her sort materials, noticing the careful precision in his movements that belied their strength. The town noticed their association, too. Whispers followed Delilah when she went to buy supplies or deliver finished orders to local clients. Some were merely curious about the handsome stranger who spent so much time at her shop. Others were more malicious, suggesting she had moved on indecently quickly after Thomas's departure. "Let them talk," Kieran said when she mentioned the gossip. "Those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter." "Easy for you to say," Delilah replied, though without rancor. "You'll ride out of here when the work is done. I have to live with these people." Something flashed in his eyes, a brief shadow of an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "True enough," he said after a moment, "but you might find some minds change once they see a woman succeeding on her own terms." A week into their collaboration, disaster struck. Delilah arrived at her shop to find the front window smashed and several bolts of expensive fabric slashed and ruined. On the wall, someone had scrawled in charcoal, "Harlots not welcome." Sheriff Mills came when called but seemed more irritated by the disruption than concerned about the vandalism. "Probably just boys getting rowdy, Mrs. O'Connor. Can't expect me to post a guard on your shop just because you've got yourself anew." Patrons so quick after Thomas left. The insinuation made her blood boil. Mr. Kane is a business associate, nothing more. And this is clearly targeted harassment. The sheriff merely shrugged. Town's got strong feelings about proper behavior, especially from women in your situation. Might want to consider that. After he left, Delilah sank down among the destroyed fabrics, the full weight of her isolation crushing down on her. This wasn't just about lost merchandise, it was a clear message that the town had judged her and found her wanting. That's how Kieran found her 30 minutes later, sitting amid the wreckage, dry-eyed but devastated. His reaction was immediate and fierce. For the first time, she glimpsed the steel beneath his measured exterior as he surveyed the damage, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "Did the sheriff see this?" he demanded. "He said it was probably just rowdy boys." Delilah's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "He implied I brought it on myself by associating with you two soon after Thomas left." Kieran's expression darkened further. "And what does the sheriff know about your marriage or your circumstances?" "Nothing. No one does. They just see what they want to see." She gestured helplessly at the ruined fabric. "I can't replace this. Even with what you're paying me, I can't afford to lose this much inventory." Kieran knelt beside her, his eyes level with hers. "Delilah," he said, the first time he'd used her given name, "do you want to fight for your place here, or would you rather make a fresh start somewhere else?" The question struck her as odd, too specific, too weighted with meaning she couldn't decipher. "What are you asking, exactly?" He stood and paced the small shop, choosing his words carefully. "I'm asking if Silver Creek is worth salvaging for you, because if it is, we can fight this. But if it isn't, there are other options. Such as coming with me to Santa Fe when I deliver these costumes. It's a growing city with opportunities for someone with your skills. No history, no judgment." Delilah stared at him, trying to understand what lay behind the offer. "You're suggesting I just leave? Abandon my shop, my home? I'm suggesting you consider whether what you're fighting for here is truly what you want, or if it's just what you thought you were supposed to want." He paused. "Think about it. You don't have to decide right now." Before she could respond, the door opened, and Mrs. Henderson from the general store peeked in, her eyes widening at the destruction before landing on Kieran standing close to Delilah. "Oh, I heard there was some trouble, but I didn't realize. I'll come back another time." She retreated quickly, but not before Delilah caught the look of scandalized interest in her eyes. By evening, the entire town would be buzzing with fresh gossip. "This is exactly what I mean," Delilah said after Mrs. Henderson left. "No matter what I do, they'll twist it." Kieran helped her to her feet. "Then perhaps it's time to give them something real to talk about." The statement hung in the air between them, ambiguous yet charged with possibility. Before Delilah could ask what he meant, he set about helping her clean up the mess, his actions once again speaking louder than words. That night, alone in the small apartment above her shop, Delilah lay awake considering Kieran's offer. Santa Fe. A new beginning. Freedom from the whispers and judgment. It was tempting, more tempting than she wanted to admit, but leaving meant Thomas had won. It meant the town had driven her out, just as they clearly wanted. The thought stiffened her resolve. She had built this shop from nothing, had poured her heart and soul into every stitch. She would not be so easily uprooted. The next morning brought a surprise. As Delilah swept the remaining glass from her storefront, the stagecoach pulled into town and disgorged a passenger who made her heart stop. Thomas O'Connor, looking decidedly worse for wear, his once fine jacket dirty and his face unshaven, stood in the street staring directly at her shop. For a moment, Delilah thought she might be imagining him. But then he moved toward her, and the familiar gait slightly bow-legged, with a swagger that had once charmed her, confirmed this was no apparition. "Delilah," he called, his voice carrying across the street. "Looks like you've had some trouble." She gripped the broom handle tighter. "Nothing I can't handle." He reached her, standing too close, smelling of travel dust and stale whiskey. "That's my girl, always independent. What are you doing here, Thomas?" Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "Come to make things right, of course." He gestured expansively. "I had a run of bad luck in Tucson, but I'm back now. We can start fresh." Delilah nearly laughed at the audacity. "Start fresh? You abandoned me with debts and no explanation. You stole our savings." Thomas's expression hardened. "I needed that money for an investment. It didn't pan out, but I'm making it up to you by coming back, aren't I? Most men wouldn't bother. Most women wouldn't want them to." She turned away, intending to go back inside, but Thomas grabbed her arm. "Now, Delilah, don't be like that. I'm still your husband. You've got obligations. Let go of me." Her voice was low but firm. "Is there a problem here?" Kieran's voice cut through the tension. He stood a few paces away, his stance casual but his eyes alert. Thomas released Delilah's arm, sizing up the newcomer. "No problem. Just having a private conversation with my wife." "Doesn't look private from where I'm standing," Kieran replied evenly. "And Mrs. O'Connor seems to have said all she cares to say." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "And who exactly are you to interfere between a man and his wife, a concerned citizen, and a friend of Mrs. O'Connor's?" The two men stared at each other, the tension palpable. Delilah could see curious faces appearing in shop windows up and down the street, eager for the drama unfolding. "Thomas," she said quietly, "I think you should go." Her husband's face twisted with fury and humiliation. "Go. I came back for you, and this is how you greet me. With another man already warming your bed." The slap was out before Delilah could think, her palm connecting with Thomas's cheek with a crack that seemed to echo down the street. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the growing crowd. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You left me with nothing but debts and shame, and now you have the gall to question my honor." Thomas rubbed his reddening cheek, his expression darkening. "You've changed, Delilah, and not for the better. Yes, I have changed. I've learned what I'm capable of when abandoned by someone who vowed to stand by me. She drew herself up, aware of the spectacle they were creating but past caring. I don't need you anymore, Thomas. I don't want you anymore. For a moment she thought he might strike her. His fist clenched and he took a half step forward. But then Kieran was beside her, his presence a solid wall between her and Thomas. I believe the lady has made herself clear, Kieran said, his voice low but carrying to the onlookers. If you're wise, you'll respect her wishes. Thomas glanced around at the watching crowd, clearly realizing he was losing face with every passing moment. This isn't over, Delilah, he muttered, backing away. A wife can't just dismiss her husband. There are laws. Then I suggest you consult a lawyer, she replied coolly. Good day, Thomas. She turned and walked back into her shop, head high, aware of Kieran following and closing the door behind them. Only when they were inside, away from prying eyes, did she allow herself to tremble. Are you all right? Kieran asked, concern evident in his voice. No, she admitted, sinking into a chair. But I will be, he nodded, respecting her honesty. That took courage. It was foolish. Now the whole town will be talking even more. Let them talk. You stood your ground, that counts for something. Delilah looked up at him, suddenly curious. Why are you really here, Kieran? In Silver Creek, I mean. It can't just be coincidence that you arrived right when I needed help. A long silence followed her question. Kieran moved to the window, looking out at the dispersing crowd, his profile sharp against the morning light. It wasn't coincidence, he finally said. I came looking for you specifically. Delilah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Why? He turned to face her fully. Because your husband didn't just leave town, Delilah. He stole money from some very dangerous men in Tucson, men I do business with. They sent me to find him. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. You've been using me to get to Thomas. Initially, yes, he admitted, holding her gaze steadily. I thought you might know where he'd gone. But I quickly realized you were as much his victim as anyone else. And the costume commission, the payment, was any of that real? All of it was real. I do need those costumes, and your work is exceptional. He stepped closer. What started as an assignment became something else. I wasn't expecting to find someone like you. Delilah struggled to process this new information, this reshaping of everything that had happened between them. These men in Tucson, what will they do to Thomas when they find him? Nothing pleasant, Kieran said honestly. He took enough money to ruin several lives. A cold realization dawned on her. That's why he came back. He's running from them, not returning to me. Most likely. He probably thought a small town like Silver Creek would be easy to hide in. And now, what happens now that you've found him? Kieran's expression was unreadable. That depends on you, on me. How? I have a choice to make, Delilah. I can fulfill my obligation to the men who sent me, or, he hesitated, or what, or I can help you instead. The offer hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice aloud. Before Delilah could respond, a commotion erupted outside, raised voices, the sound of running feet. Kieran moved swiftly to the window. Damn, Thomas is making a scene at the saloon. Stay here. No. Delilah stood, her decision already made. Whatever happens, I need to see it. I won't hide away while my life falls apart around me again. Together, they stepped outside into the bright morning sun. Down the street, a crowd had gathered outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. At its center stood Thomas, clearly drunk despite the early hour, waving a pistol wildly. Where is he? Thomas was shouting. Where's the man who's stolen my wife? Sheriff Mills stood a cautious distance away, his hand on his own weapon. Put the gun down, O'Connor. Nobody's stolen anything from you. Like hell they haven't. Thomas spotted Delilah and Kieran emerging from the shop and pointed the gun in their direction. "There he is, the thieving bastard himself." Delilah felt Kieran stiffen beside her, his hand moving slightly toward his own weapon, concealed beneath his jacket. "Don't," she murmured. "Let me handle this." Before he could object, she stepped forward, moving deliberately into the space between the buildings, her voice clear and strong. "Thomas, you're drunk and making a fool of yourself. Put the gun down." "A fool? Me?" Thomas's laugh was harsh and bitter. "I'm not the one being led astray by the first smooth-talking stranger to roll into town. Did you know who he really is, Delilah? Did he tell you what he does for the Tucson Syndicate?" Whispers rippled through the crowd. Delilah kept her focus on Thomas, moving steadily closer. "Whatever Mr. Kane does or doesn't do isn't the issue here. You abandoned me, Thomas. You stole our money and left me to face the consequences alone." "I came back, didn't I?" Thomas's voice cracked, the gun wavering in his hand. "I came back for you." "You came back because you're in trouble," she replied softly, close enough now that only those nearest could hear. "You always run home when you're in trouble, Thomas, but I'm not your shelter anymore." Something in her calm certainty seemed to enrage him further. "You've got no right to turn me away. You're my wife. Not for much longer." The words came with a finality that surprised even Delilah herself. "I'm filing for divorce, Thomas." A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. Divorce was rare in 1878, especially in frontier towns where women had few legal rights and even fewer financial options. But Delilah had never been more certain of anything in her life. Thomas's face contorted with fury. "You can't divorce me. No judge in the territory would grant it. She won't need to." Kieran's voice cut through the tension as he stepped forward to stand beside Delilah. "Thomas O'Connor, you're wanted in Tucson for theft and fraud. The territorial marshal already has the paperwork. Abandonment of a spouse is grounds enough for divorce in this territory, especially when coupled with criminal charges." Sheriff Mills moved closer, his expression conflicted. "Is this true, Kane? You're working with the territorial marshals?" Kieran nodded once, not taking his eyes off Thomas. "Special deputy, assigned to bring in O'Connor for crimes committed in Pima County. I have the documentation in my room." The revelation caused another wave of murmurs through the crowd. Delilah glanced at Kieran, understanding dawning. He hadn't told her the whole truth. He wasn't working for the criminals Thomas had stolen from, but for the law. Thomas, sensing the tide turning against him, grew desperate. "He's lying. He's here to kill me for the syndicate. Delilah, tell them." But Delilah stood silent, her allegiance clear in the way she remained at Kieran's side. "It's over, Thomas," Kieran said quietly. "Put the gun down and come peacefully. Make at least this one decent choice." For a terrible moment, Delilah thought Thomas would fire. His finger twitched on the trigger, his eyes wild with cornered desperation. Then, with a broken sob, he lowered the weapon. Sheriff Mills moved in quickly to disarm and restrain him. As he was being led away, Thomas looked back at Delilah one last time. "I did love you once," he said, all bluster gone from his voice, "before everything went wrong." "I know," she replied simply. "That's what makes it sad." As Thomas disappeared into the sheriff's office, the crowd lingered, their focus now on Delilah and Kieran. The whispering continued, but something in their expressions had changed, curiosity replacing condemnation, respect mingling with the ever-present judgment. "A special deputy," Delilah murmured to Kieran as they walked slowly back toward her shop. "That wasn't entirely honest." "Not entirely," he admitted, "but not a complete fabrication either. I do work with the marshals sometimes, tracking down certain types of fugitives. It was easier than explaining the complicated truth." "Which is," Kieran sighed. The complicated truth is that I own interests in several legitimate businesses in Tucson, including the theater company I told you about. Thomas embezzled from one of my partners before disappearing. I came looking for him and the money, yes, but I am authorized to bring him in to face charges. And you didn't tell me because. At first because I wasn't sure if you were involved, then because I wasn't sure how you'd react. He stopped, turning to face her fully. And later because I didn't want you to think everything between us was just about finding him. Delilah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Was it just about finding him? No, the word hung between them, simple but profound. It started that way, but it changed. You changed it. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Still, doubts lingered. How can I believe you now after so many half-truths? You can't, not completely. Not yet. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to prove myself with total honesty from now on. Before she could respond, Mrs. Henderson approached, her usual disapproving expression replaced by something almost conciliatory. Mrs. O'Connor, she said stiffly, I just wanted to say, well, we didn't know about your husband's criminal activities. The town might have been hasty in its judgment. It was as close to an apology as Delilah was likely to get. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I appreciate that. The older woman nodded, then turned to Kieran with newfound respect. Deputy Kane, we're grateful for your service. Will you be staying in Silver Creek long? Kieran glanced at Delilah before answering. That remains to be seen, madam. After Mrs. Henderson departed, others from town approached, some to express belated support, others simply curious about the dramatic events. Through it all, Kieran remained at Delilah's side, neither possessive nor presumptuous, but steadily present. Later, when they finally had a moment alone in her shop, Delilah asked the question that had been forming in her mind. What happens now? To Thomas, to me, to us. Thomas will face trial in Tucson. With the evidence we have, he'll likely serve time. Kieran leaned against her workbench. As for you, that's entirely your choice. You can stay here and rebuild. The town seems ready to accept you now that they know the truth. And if I don't want to stay? His eyes met hers, careful but hopeful. Then my offer stands. Come to Santa Fe or Tucson or anywhere else that calls to you. I'd be honored to help you start fresh. And you? Where do you go when this is finished? I have business in Santa Fe, as I told you after that. He hesitated. Delilah, I'm not going to pretend I can offer you certainty. My life isn't settled in one place, but I can offer honesty, respect, and companionship for as long as you want it. It wasn't a declaration of love, but somehow it felt more valuable, a promise grounded in reality rather than romantic fantasy. After Thomas's grand promises that had dissolved into betrayal, Kieran's measured honesty was refreshing. I need time, she said finally. To think, to decide what I truly want. Kieran nodded, accepting her answer without pressure. Take all the time you need. I'll be here until Thomas is transported to Tucson, at least another week. That week proved transformative for Delilah. With Thomas in custody and the truth about his crimes known, the town's attitude toward her shifted dramatically. Women who had shunned her now stopped by her shop with mending or orders. Men tipped their hats respectfully on the street. Sheriff Mills himself came to apologize for his earlier dismissal of the vandalism, promising to investigate properly. Through it all, Kieran maintained a respectful distance in public while continuing to visit her shop daily to check on the progress of the costumes. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond the practical to dreams, fears, and hopes. Delilah learned about his childhood in Boston, his service in the Union Army, and his journey west seeking purpose after the war. He shared stories of the theater troupes he'd worked with, the mining towns and cattle settlements where he'd done business, the characters he'd met along the way. In turn, she told him about her apprenticeship in Philadelphia, her dreams of creating beautiful things that would bring joy, her gradual disillusionment with Thomas, and her determination to succeed despite it all. "You could do well in Santa Fe," he told her one evening as they shared a simple meal in her apartment above the shop. "The city has wealth, culture, women their commission gowns from Paris and New York. Your talent would be recognized." "And is that what you want?" she asked. "For me to come to Santa Fe?" Kieran set down his fork, considering his answer carefully. "What I want is for you to be happy, Delilah. If that's here in Silver Creek making peace with the past, then I'll respect that. If it's Santa Fe or somewhere else entirely, starting anew, I'd be glad to be part of that journey. But it has to be your choice, freely made." His answer, so different from Thomas's assumptions about what she should want, touched something deep within her. For the first time, Delilah allowed herself to consider not just practical options, but what her heart truly desired. The day before Thomas was to be transported to Tucson, Kieran came to the shop earlier than usual. Delilah had just finished the last of the costumes, an elaborate creation for a Shakespearean queen that had challenged her skills and creativity. "It's magnificent," Kieran said, examining the detailed embroidery and clever construction. "Even better than I imagined." "Thank you." Delilah carefully packed the costume with the others, ready for transport. "I've enjoyed the challenge." Kieran watched her work, something uncharacteristically hesitant in his manner. "Delilah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, without concern for my feelings." She straightened, giving him her full attention. "All right. Have you decided about staying or leaving?" Delilah had, in fact, spent most of the night weighing her options, examining her heart. "I have. And I'm leaving Silver Creek." The decision, once spoken aloud, felt right. "There's nothing holding me here anymore. No real connections, no true home, just memories I'd rather leave behind." Relief and hope flickered across Kieran's face. "To Santa Fe, perhaps, or perhaps somewhere else entirely." She met his gaze steadily. "I haven't decided yet whether I'll be traveling alone." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I see." "Do you?" Delilah stepped closer to him. "Kieran, you came into my life under false pretenses, looking for my husband. You've been honest about that. But something else has grown between us, something unexpected and real. I need to know if you feel it too, or if I'm simply convenient because of my connection to Thomas." Kieran reached for her hands, holding them gently. "Delilah O'Connor, you have never been merely convenient. What I feel for you has nothing to do with Thomas and everything to do with your courage, your talent, your determination. I've watched you face betrayal and humiliation with dignity. I've seen you create beauty from nothing but thread and vision. I've witnessed your capacity for both strength and tenderness." He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I came to Silver Creek looking for a thief, but I found something infinitely more valuable. I found you, and if you'll have me, I'd like to see where this journey might lead us." It wasn't a declaration of undying love or a marriage proposal. It was something more honest, more authentic. An acknowledgement of genuine feeling and a hope for shared future possibility. Delilah felt tears gathering in her eyes, not of sadness, but of release, the final letting go of a past that had constrained her for too long. "I'd like that too." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Thomas, shackled and under guard, was escorted to the stagecoach that would take him to Tucson to face justice. A crowd gathered to witness his departure, the spectacle too enticing to miss. Delilah stood apart from the others, watching without satisfaction or rancor, as the man she had once loved and trusted prepared to leave her life forever. Thomas caught her eye just before boarding, a complicated mix of emotions crossing his face: regret, resentment, perhaps even a shadow of the affection they had once shared. She nodded once in acknowledgement, a final goodbye to the life they had tried and failed to build together. As the stage coach pulled away, Delilah became aware of the town's attention shifting to her. Mrs. Henderson approached, followed by several other townswomen. "Mrs. O'Connor," she said formally, that is, the Ladies' Aid Society, wanted to express our regret for how you've been treated. We hope you'll consider staying in Silver Creek. Your shop adds refinement to our little town." The offer, while genuine, came too late. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, but I've made my decision. I'll be leaving Silver Creek tomorrow." Murmurs of surprise and disappointment rippled through the group. "But where will you go?" someone asked. Before Delilah could respond, Kieran appeared at her side, dressed not in his usual trail clothes but in a well-cut suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and confident bearing. "Mrs. O'Connor has accepted a position as head designer for the Santa Fe Theater Company," he announced, loud enough for all to hear. "Her talent deserves a wider audience than Silver Creek can provide." The statement, while not entirely accurate, wasn't entirely false either. They had discussed possibilities for her work in Santa Fe, including designing for the theater, but nothing had been formalized. Delilah gave him a questioning look, which he answered with a slight smile and a whispered, "Trust me." Turning back to the gathering crowd, Kieran raised his voice further. "Before we depart, however, there's one matter that requires resolution." He stepped into the center of the street, drawing all eyes to him. "Citizens of Silver Creek, my name is Kieran Kane. I came to your town tracking a fugitive, and I found more than I expected." Delilah watched, puzzled, as he beckoned her forward to join him in the middle of the dusty street. "Delilah O'Connor," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air, "you've faced abandonment and betrayal with dignity. You've endured this town's judgment with grace. You've proven your strength and independence beyond any doubt." To Delilah's utter astonishment, Kieran dropped to one knee before her, taking her hand in his. Gasps and whispers erupted from the watching crowd. "I know we've known each other only a short time," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "But in that time, I've come to admire your spirit, your talent, and your heart. I'm not a perfect man, and I can't promise a perfect life, but I can promise honesty, respect, and unwavering devotion." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "Delilah O'Connor, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need my protection or support, but because I believe we could build something beautiful together." Stunned silence fell over the street as everyone waited for her response. Delilah stared at Kieran, her mind racing. This was unexpected, dramatic, public, and completely contrary to the measured discussions they'd had about their future. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw not calculation but genuine feeling, perhaps even vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. This wasn't the careful business arrangement they'd discussed. This was a man laying his heart bare before an entire town. "Kieran," she said softly, "are you certain? This is very sudden." "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied, his voice equally low. "I wanted to make it clear to everyone, especially you, that this isn't about convenience or circumstances. It's about choosing you, openly and without reservation." The public nature of his proposal suddenly made sense. In one bold gesture, he was wiping away the town's whispers and judgment, replacing scandal with romance, shame with celebration. He was giving her back her dignity in the very place it had been taken. Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes as the full meaning of his actions registered. This wasn't just a proposal, it was redemption. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Yes, Kieran Kane, I will marry you." A cheer went up from the gathered crowd, the very same people who had whispered behind their hands about her just days before. Kieran slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though he'd known all along what her answer would be, and rose to his feet. What happened next would become the stuff of Silver Creek legend for generations to come. Kieran turned to address the crowd, his arm around Delilah's waist. "Friends," he called out, though few could truly be called that, "since Mrs. O'Connor and I will be departing tomorrow, I propose we waste no time. Reverend Parker," he nodded to the town's minister standing among the onlookers, "would you do us the honor of marrying us today, right here in full view of the town?" The Reverend, caught off guard but clearly moved by the romantic gesture, stepped forward. "It would be my privilege, Mr. Kane, if the bride agrees." All eyes turned to Delilah. For a moment, doubt flickered. Was this too fast, too public, too much? But then she looked at Kieran, at the steadfast certainty in his gaze, and knew that sometimes the right choice required courage rather than caution. "Yes," she said clearly. "Let's be married right here, right now." What followed was unlike anything Silver Creek had ever seen. Word spread rapidly, and soon the entire town gathered in the main street. Shopkeepers closed their doors to witness the event. Children were hoisted onto shoulders for a better view. Even the men from the saloon emerged, bottles in hand but behavior respectful. Mrs. Henderson, perhaps seeking to cement her change of heart, insisted on providing flowers from her own garden for the bride. The blacksmith's wife offered a lace handkerchief as something borrowed. The young women who had once snickered at Delilah's misfortune now sighed romantically as she stood before Reverend Parker in her best blue dress, wildflowers in her hands, facing the man who had changed everything. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Kieran spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, promising to honor, cherish, and respect Delilah all the days of their lives. Delilah, in turn, pledged her loyalty and love, her voice growing stronger with each word. When Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran drew Delilah into an embrace that was both tender and possessive. Their kiss, witnessed by the entire town, spoke of promise and passion in equal measure. As they turned to face the cheering crowd, now husband and wife, Delilah caught sight of Sheriff Mills standing at the edge of the gathering. He tipped his hat in a gesture that might have been respect, might have been apology. She nodded in acknowledgement, letting go of the last remnants of bitterness. The past was behind her now, only the future mattered. That evening, a spontaneous celebration erupted at the Silver Dollar Saloon. The entire town seemed determined to send the newlyweds off with proper festivity. Tables were pushed aside for dancing. A local fiddler played merry tunes, and even the most proper townswomen joined in the merriment. Delilah, still adjusting to the whirlwind events of the day, found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of whom had shunned her just a week before. Their sudden change of heart might have seemed hypocritical, but she chose to accept it as genuine, recognizing that people were complex, capable of both cruelty and kindness depending on circumstances. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, his hand warm and steady at her waist. Delilah considered the question seriously. "Happy? Yes. Also overwhelmed, a little scared, and completely amazed at how quickly life can change." He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her. "Having second thoughts. Not about you," she assured him, "but this is all happening so fast. Yesterday I was a deserted wife facing ruin. Today I'm married to a man I've known for barely 2 weeks, about to leave the only home I've had in the West. Too fast, concern shadowed his eyes. No, Delilah surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. Somehow it feels right. Like I've finally stepped onto the path I was meant to follow. Relief softened his features. That's how it feels for me too. Like all the winding roads of my life were leading to you, even when I didn't know it. As they circled the floor, other couples joining the dance around them, Delilah allowed herself to imagine the future that awaited them, a new home in Santa Fe, work that challenged her creativity, and a partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. It wouldn't be perfect, no life ever was, but it would be genuine, and it would be theirs to shape together. The following morning, as dawn painted the eastern sky with promise, Kieran loaded the last of their belongings onto the wagon. Delilah had sold her shop fixtures to a woman from the neighboring town who had always dreamed of opening a millinery. The costumes, carefully packed in trunks, would be delivered to the theater company in Santa Fe as promised. As they prepared to depart, a small crowd gathered to bid them farewell. Mrs. Henderson presented Delilah with a basket of provisions for the journey. The blacksmith handed Kieran a new horseshoe for luck. Sheriff Mills shook Kieran's hand and nodded respectfully to Delilah. "Safe travels, Mrs. Kane," the sheriff said, using her new name for the first time. "Thank you, Sheriff." Delilah kept her tone cordial, letting bygones be bygones. "I wish you well." As Kieran helped her onto the wagon seat, Delilah took one last look at Silver Creek, the dusty Main Street, the modest buildings, the faces of people who had witnessed her humiliation and her triumph. There was no regret in her heart, only a sense of completion. This chapter of her life was ending, but the story was far from over. "Ready?" Kieran asked, settling beside her and taking the reins. Delilah slipped her hand into his, feeling the solid warmth of his fingers interlacing with hers. "Ready." As the wagon rolled out of town, the rising sun at their backs and the open road before them, Delilah felt a sense of liberation unlike anything she'd ever known. The town that had laughed when her husband left was now watching with respect, and perhaps even a touch of envy as she departed with a man who had married her in the street, publicly declaring her worth for all to see. The future stretched before them like the horizon, vast, unknown, and full of possibility. Whatever challenges it held, they would face them together, not as savior and saved, but as equal partners in a journey of their own making. Delilah O'Connor Kane smiled into the morning light, her heart full of hope. The road ahead might be long, but for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she wanted to be. 6 months later, the citizens of Santa Fe had grown accustomed to seeing the handsome couple walking arm in arm through the plaza, the tall, distinguished businessman and his beautiful wife, whose designs for both the theater and the city's elite had quickly established her reputation as an artist of exceptional talent. The Kane residence on the outskirts of town had become known for its warm hospitality and lively gatherings, where actors mingled with merchants, artists with ranchers, creating a salon unlike anything Santa Fe had seen before. At the center of it all was Delilah, whose natural grace and genuine interest in others had won her friends in all corners of society. Kieran, true to his word, had proven himself a partner in every sense, supporting Delilah's growing business while continuing his own ventures, sharing both responsibilities and triumphs, learning and growing together through the inevitable adjustments of married life. News had reached them that Thomas O'Connor had been sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison for his crimes. Delilah had received the information with equanimity, wishing neither further harm nor particular good fortune to the man who had once been the center of her world. That chapter was closed, The page turned. On a crisp autumn evening, as they sat on the porch of their adobe home watching the sunset paint the Sangre de Cristo Mountains with gold and crimson, Delilah leaned her head against Kieran's shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked, echoing the question he had posed to her on their wedding day. Kieran's arm tightened around her. "More than I ever thought possible. And you?" Delilah placed his hand over her stomach, where the first subtle signs of new life were beginning to show. "Completely. Our journey is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it leads." As darkness settled over the landscape and stars emerged in the vast New Mexican sky, Delilah Kane reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. From abandonment to redemption, from shame to triumph, from a hasty wedding in a dusty street to a partnership that deepened with each passing day, every step had led her home, not to a place, but to a person. To the man beside her, whose steady strength had helped her discover her own. To the life they were building together, stone by stone, day by day, with patience and purpose and love. In the end, it wasn't the town's laughter or judgment that had defined her. It wasn't even Thomas's betrayal or Kieran's rescue. It was her own resilience, her willingness to risk her heart again, her courage to seize happiness when it appeared before her unexpected, unplanned, but unmistakably right. As Kieran drew her close against the evening chill, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin when everything seems lost. Sometimes the surest path forward appears only when all other roads are closed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the greatest love stories start with a wedding in the street, witnessed by a town that had forgotten how to believe in second chances, until reminded by two people brave enough to claim their own.